You and Jim were talking about this years ago, that we're headed for a bankruptcy, and you've said this many times in your own right. You're a brilliant guy as well. Jim's, passed away, rest in peace. But you said that, a long time ago that mathematically, the country's in big trouble. You can't pull it out. And now they have this Doge thing, which is to cut government spending. And you wrote a piece on BillHolter.com, fantastic website, and you said, listen, you cut out this much spending, a couple of $1 trillion, and we're going to be in a depression. Talk about that.
Yeah. If you go back to since 2008, the financial system, the real economy, has been on life support ever since. Up until 2022, that was the first serious interest rate hiking cycle. What's happened is, just look at what's happened with the debt since 2008. It's exploded. We're over 36 trillion. The last trillion that they added only took 4 months. And this past year we paid, I think, 1.1 trillion or thereabouts in interest only. This coming year, because of the bonds and notes that are rolling over at higher interest rates, this year it's going to be 1.5 trillion, and you're probably looking in 2026 and on 2 trillion plus in interest only. So that shows, that is the math right there, that it's unsustainable. The article that I wrote, and I think it was a week or 2 weeks back, it wasn't long, it was just a short, brief article. But the point I tried to make was, okay, so we're running $2 trillion deficits now. What if we had a balanced budget? Or what if Doge actually does, which I don't think they can. I think the number is going to be 300 billion, maybe 500 billion, something like that. But let's agree that Doge is able to get savings or cut wasteful spending of $2 trillion. That's $2 trillion that does not get into, it doesn't get borrowed, and it doesn't get spent. And the spending part is the important part, because if it doesn't get spent, then it does not go into the real economy. Now, last year, the economy was, I think GDP was roughly 29 trillion. $2 trillion is about 7% of 29 trillion. If you take that 2 trillion out, that's 7% of GDP that doesn't exist or didn't happen. Not to mention the ripple effects. If you've got people that aren't working, they no longer stop on their way into work to get coffee or whatever. There are ripple effects. But if that $2 trillion doesn't get spent, that's 7% of GDP that doesn't exist. So instead of whatever the number was this past year, 2 or 3%, subtract 7% from that. And what do you have? You have negative 4 or 5% growth. And that's what we would have had every single year since 2008. If we had not been running deficits, we would have been running a negative GDP economy.
I don't think people are grasping how bad this is. We just opened up the year with the biggest increase in spending.
2 months deficit.
Yeah. And in October.
Right.
Go ahead. 50.
It was a 2-month deficit.
$50 billion just in Medicare.
It was a 2-month deficit of $600 billion.
50.
October and November
was how much?
October and November was over $600 billion deficit. The $50 billion I think you're talking about is the Medicare surprise.
Well, and here we have these guys running around wanting to put wanted posters up for healthcare officials, and nobody wants to talk about the stuff that Ed Dow talks about, which is the huge death and disability and injuries in the millions just in America, and what kind of a strain that is on on medical facilities, heart attacks and blood clots and infertility and cancer. And, all of a sudden, pow, 50 billion. Where'd that come from? Let's not talk about it, though. That's a huge number. And does that play into the what's happening in America and the economy?
Well, yeah, ultimately it will, because if you have people dying, people dying is the same thing as birth rates collapsing. Over time, it's outright deflationary, and you do not want a deflationary. You don't want deflation when you've got as much debt outstanding as we do, because then the debt collapses. But $50 billion is not. It's not an error. I mean, they actually spent it. It was a surprise, and like you said, the only thing I can think of is it has to do with people getting sick and needing more health care because of the jab.
But that, without question, people are getting sick. I mean, that's the numbers that Ed Dowd said. Ed Dowd also said, if you look at all this, euphoria, with Donald Trump, and I voted for him, I like him. But man, we got a lot of problems. And he said, Trump is inheriting a turd of an economy. That was his phrase. Trump is inheriting a bad economy. Explain how you see it.
Well, yeah, I mean, we know that we're being lied to on pretty much all the numbers. So yeah, definitely he's inheriting an economy that's nowhere near what they're telling us it is. And I've said, and I think I said this probably on our last interview, is that, Trump, at that point it would have been if Trump wins. Now that he won, Trump's not going to come in and save this system, because it's math. The only thing Trump is going to be able to do is make whatever happens follow the rule of law, instead of making the law up as they go. I mean, this is a math problem. The debt has already been put into place. That money's already been spent. And now we have to deal with it. Now we have to pay the interest on it, and, paying it back, that will never, ever happen. But yeah, he's absolutely right.
Well, and then we have Kamala, which slipped out at the beginning. Oh, we'd like to tax unrealized gains. They were just going to go on a pig fest. They were going to take everything from everybody because, we need the money and you don't. And so that's how they were going to, that was part of how they were going to have this reset. Now you're saying the reset's going to follow a different path. It's going to be resets instead of, it's going to be defaults. How is the reset going to happen? That's what we're talking, that's what she slipped out was talking about. He's not smart enough to, slobber around and come up with this. But that's what she was talking about. She was talking about the reset, and that's not going to happen now. Just outright stealing money, which we're going to get to that with the Janet Yellen. But how do you envision the reset happening?
Well, first off, what Kamala Harris was saying basically is that they were going to front run the Great Taking. The reset, as I see it, and I believe there will be at least two resets. The first one, once things go bad, once you have derivatives blowing up, and we go through the Great Taking aspect of it, where bank balances are taken, brokerage balances are taken. The first reset, I believe, is planned. They know this thing's going to go down, and what they'll do is they will bring forth the central bank digital currency, and there won't be much pushback at all, because people will have lost basically their nest eggs, basically their savings, and people will beg for help. And if that solution happens to be, which it will be, the central bank digital currency, so be it. People are going to accept that. The only problem is the central bank digital currency is still fiat. It's still backed by nothing. So while that may placate people within the United States, it's certainly not going to placate our trading partners. They want to trade something real for something real, and they're not going to trade something real for a central bank digital currency that has no backing and in essence is nothing. It is fiat currency.
Don't forget to hit that like button. It really helps out the channel. And if you want to stay updated with more content like this, be sure to subscribe and click the bell icon so you never miss a video.
This is why Trump wants to have, which doesn't make me feel all warm and fuzzy. This is why Trump wants to, one of the people who was speaking, I think when he was one of his kids, was talking about how we want to make, the United States the digital currency powerhouse of the world. Basically, they want to make us to be the center of all cryptocurrencies. And what does that tell you about where they're thinking? They're not talking about gold or mining more gold or putting out more output or more oil or anything else. They're not talking about any of that.
Well, they are talking about more oil. They are talking about drill, baby, drill. But if you recall, running up to the election, they were floating, well, what we're going to do is we're going to monetize the gold, and that's only what? I don't know, $800, $900 billion worth of gold. And we're going to buy Bitcoin, and that's going to solve the debt problem. So now they've dropped that. We're not hearing anything at all about using the Treasury gold. And obviously, they can't use the Treasury gold because it doesn't exist. I mean, it's not been audited since 1956, and there's no way anybody could convince me, unless I saw it with my own eyes, that that gold still exists. I think it's a very dangerous gambit to think that making the United States the Bitcoin capital of the world. And again, I mean, my view on Bitcoin, my view on the cryptos is that they're basically just perfect accounting systems of digital code. And I don't, digital code is nothing. There's not a use for it. It's not a productive. It's not productive.
Oh, Bill, people, the comments are going to come in and say, "Oh, you don't know what you're talking about, Bill. You don't know what you're
dinosaur."
You're a dinosaur. Catherine Allison Fitz is very worried about their Texas. I think is going to have a Bitcoin repository, a depository, and she says, "Listen, they're going to dump all the people with Bitcoin are going to dump it. They're going to dump it onto the taxpayer. They're going to end up buying land, like the Harvard endowment's doing, like Bill Gates is doing. They're going to buy real stuff with their Bitcoin." And the taxpayer is going to end up with a thumb drive. What do you think about that?
I would just use one word: tulips. I mean, the humanity went crazy 300 years ago over tulips, and humanity again has lost their collective minds.
I know you work for Miles Franklin. You are a gold broker, so in fairness, you're talking your book. Okay, fine, but it's hard to argue with the real stuff. I don't mean to. That's not a criticism, but it's hard to argue with the real stuff. Go ahead.
But understand that an ounce of gold or an ounce of silver in your hand is something you can touch. It's something real, and it's proof positive that labor, capital, and equipment were already used to create that coin, bar, or whatever.
Yeah, what's up with silver? I mean, that's been languishing for so long. It's what, $32 or $31, or which is pretty. I think you and I were. Was it you? Pretty close to mining cost. $31 an ounce, right?
Right.
To mine it and smelt it and pound it into a coin. And go ahead.
Right. It is close. It is close to the mining cost. But understand that silver is a very, very small market. It's like 1/10 the size of gold. It's easy to bully that market around. When I say bully that market around, that's what they do to all markets. All markets are rigged. If they want something up, they use derivatives to buy that asset. If they want to suppress the price, which they have every reason to suppress gold because it's a direct competitor to the dollar, and even a bigger reason to suppress silver because it is the fuse to gold. You could not have $100, $200 silver and gold not be skyrocketing. But just understand that because it's such a small market, it is very, very easy to bully. And we are getting to the point now, some of the exchange for physicals, which is COMEX's way of hiding deliveries, have gone off the charts going to London. So I think we're very, very close to a short squeeze caused by a failure to deliver.
I want to go back. I want to just backtrack here just for a minute about because this I should have brought this up. You were talking about the Bank of England having secret bailouts. They're gonna make sure that the bailouts they have are going to be secret, and this is part of your first wave of the reset, the bailout, which could turn into a bail-in, stealing depositors' money. Talk about that. The Bank of England going to keep the banks they're bailing out secret, like it's their little club.
Yeah, I had no idea that was even being thought about or going on, but I saw the article yesterday, and I posted 4 or 5 different articles. I mean, yesterday was if you want to call it a stellar day of posting, because I mean, there's some real meat in that information. For the Bank of England to say that starting January 1st, 2025, that whenever they bail out an institution, they're not going to tell the public that institution was bailed out. That tells me, and I think the comment that I made was, so 2025 is the year. Because, I mean, why would they come out and say, starting January 1st, we're not going to tell you who we're bailing out? Wait a minute. Why are you needing to bail anybody out? I mean, markets are at all-time highs. You tell us everything is great. The financial markets are great. The economy's great. Well, apparently that's bullshit, and it's not so great. And you see the need that you're going to have to bail institutions out starting in 2025.
You think the reset is? I'll get this from you. You think the reset is 2025? That's the flag, right? The red flag raised on the pole.
Yeah, I do. I mean, and the news out of Britain, that just adds, that's just one more data point pointing to 2025 is the year. I mean, why all of a sudden this year are they even talking about bailouts? How could they be talking about bailouts with markets where they are right now? I mean, this is euphoria. This is a blissful moment, according to them.
You think people will lose their 401ks, their bank money, their deposits? You think that's all going to get poof, goodbye? It's our money now. That's what you think's going to happen in phase 1 of the Great Reset?
Well, yeah, I think that. I mean, first off, the Great Taking is absolutely factual. All those laws have been put on the books. Why were those laws put on the books if there's not a problem? Why are those laws put on the books if FDIC is totally solvent and able to solve any bank problems, or same thing for SIPC? Why have those laws been written and put on the books, not just in the U.S., not just in the U.K., but all over the world?
Laws where they can take depositors and shareholders' money.
Right. Well, not share. Yeah, what they do is they take the shares of shareholders out of brokerage accounts, and in banks, yeah, they take the money. And what they do with that money is they try to help keep that entity who's holding the money or holding the shares, try to help keep them solvent.
People have no idea. They think that money in that bank, it's their money. And you're saying that these laws, they said, well, listen, you're now an unbacked creditor, right?
Unsecured creditor.
Unsecured.
You're an unsecured creditor, and you are the most junior creditor of all, which means you get paid last. And if there wasn't a problem, you might get paid. The line might still last. But the fact that there's a problem, you're not going to get paid. You're last in line.
Wow. And you think this is the year? 2025 coming up?
Well, I mean, Yeah, I mean, the Bank of England just told you that starting January 1st, they're not going to tell you who they're bailing out. So it tells me, yeah, this year, I mean, just looking at everything, yeah, it's obvious that this could happen any day. But the Bank of England is telling you it's this year.
Wow. What about Janet Yellen? I mean, you wrote in your piece about the 15 trillion, and you actually put "sorry, not sorry," which I thought was funny.
Right.
But still, what does
Yeah.
that tell you about what's going on? They Janet Yellen with this, and then you have that you wrote about with the Russians. They stole their more money from them, and they're going to hand it to Ukraine. Tell me, what does that mean with the economy? People are just like oblivious. They don't talk about any of this other than, oh, did you see Google shares? Did you see Bitcoin at 101,000? Look at another all-time high for NASDAQ, but in the background you have theft going on.
Yeah, it's two separate issues. The first issue, Janet Yellen apologized for piling $15 trillion more onto the debt. And that's where I put, sorry, not sorry. The point being, the United States, the global financial system can't run because the dollar is the world's reserve currency unless the U.S. borrows and deficit spends. They have to, just like any Ponzi scheme, you've got to have new money coming in. That's where the new money comes from, and that's what Janet Yellen apologized for. The other issue with the Treasury, and I think this is disgusting, so short-sighted. If you recall back in October of 2022, and by the way, you can go back and look at both the gold and silver chart from October 2022, that's where they took off. The day after it was announced that the Treasury basically confiscated 300 billion of Russian treasuries, and I mean, Russia has had zero use of that capital. What they announced a week and a half ago, and I think it was Monday or Tuesday, they actually sent the money, was that they were going to take 50 of that 300 billion of treasuries and use that as collateral to create a 20 billion or 20 trillion dollar, $20 billion loan for Ukraine. Now think about it from the standpoint of the Russians. Okay, first off, it's outright theft. You're taking 50 billion of my money. You're creating a loan. You're using that as collateral, creating a loan to give 20 billion to my enemy to fight me. I mean, that is just, it's unbelievable. And to add insult to injury, what did Janet Yellen and the high-up Treasury officials do? They basically held a ceremony. They all got into a room with a laptop. They loaded the computer with the $20 billion that they were going to send to the World Bank to forward to Ukraine. And they pressed the send button and did a photo op and probably, cackled and giggled and think that it's funny. I'm pretty sure that Vladimir Putin does not think it's funny. And Vladimir Putin, by the way, does have the hypersonic missiles that we can't defend against. We can't do anything. But more importantly, what about the rest of the world? The rest of the world saw this happen. And, let's say you're a smaller country and you've only got a total of $100 billion held at the Treasury. You certainly don't want to do anything to piss the U.S. off, because now, if they've confiscated it from Russia, what could they do to us?
It just makes us look. What did they're going to have all these pardons? And Martin Armstrong says it just makes the Democrats look like a bunch of crooks and thieves. It just makes them look criminal, and it's just the criminality is off the charts. And do they have to have the criminality to keep the system going?
It doesn't make them look like crooks and thieves. They are crooks and thieves, and all they've done is prove it.
Do they have to have this type of criminality to keep this system going? I mean, that's where we're down to. out and out, in your face, we're going to steal, we're going to have crime, we're going to have war. In your face, we're going to sell off all the border wall stuff for pennies on the dollar, all the border wall things to build borders. That you're down in Texas, I think Texas is going to buy the stuff. But anyway, do they have to have the criminality to keep the system going, and how long can this last?
Well, the border wall, that's a totally separate issue. I mean, they're selling pieces of the wall for $5 a piece. That's not criminality. Yeah, they're probably selling at $5 a piece to their own cronies. But what that shows is that their true intent is that they are not Americans. They're not patriotic. They do not give one shit about this country. They purposely have tried to collapse this country, and I think it goes back, it goes back to at least 2008, maybe to the year 2000. I mean, the things that are being done are purposely detrimental to the United States, and again, they're doing it publicly, and it really looks like sour grapes. I mean, if you're selling the border wall off $5 a section, that's, the average person has to look at that and say, well, hey, wait a minute, it's just so bad.
Do they have to have the criminality to keep this thing going? How long can they keep this thing going? Do they have to have the criminality, and how long can they keep it going?
Well, I'm going to tell you that the criminality is the deficit spending itself, which we've been doing since, 1960, for the last 65 years or whatever. The United States has bullied its way year after year. A good book to read, which apparently the Chinese have read because they're now doing the same thing, but a good book to read is Confessions of an Economic Hitman. The author's name is Perkins. And basically what we did in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and now China's doing it, is a country will get into a financial problem, and you go there and you say, oh, well, we'll solve your problem. We'll lend you money. But the bridge that you're building or the power plant or whatever, we're going to take that as collateral. And when they can't pay, then the collateral gets foreclosed and the new owner is the lender. And that's what we did for years and years. But we have bullied the world and been a bad actor in the world to the point where the rest of the world is joining up and saying, we don't want this anymore. And that's called the BRICS.
And you think that will I mean, I hate to say this, but I think Martin Armstrong says Trump's going to have he said, I'd love to pat him on the back and say it's going to be 4 years of bliss, but he says Trump's going to have a hard time in the White House. I'm not wishing that. I'm just looking at, to your point, the math. And is Trump's going to find himself in a wall of in a quagmire of doo-doo, isn't he? We all are.
He's in a quagmire. He's in a quagmire of mathematics, and the mathematics is this country's broke. The whole financial system is a Ponzi scheme that depends on basically deficit spending and increases of money supply, or call it monetization.
And so, how do you envision this going down with the Trump? First of all, what's the second half of the reset? Number one, you lose your bank accounts, your shares, your 401ks. Number two is, what's the second part of it?
Yeah, the second part is where foreign nations don't accept U.S. dollars or whatever the central bank digital currency is. They say, no, we didn't want the dollar, and we don't want this unbacked digital dollar. And what happens there is then our trade deficit collapses because we're not able to import real stuff and export basically fake currency. In the second reset, what happens is you'll have true price discovery, and we're going to find out that a lot of things have been priced wrong for many, many years, and they were priced wrong because they were forced by derivatives to be priced incorrectly.
So
and that's your second reset.
So silver will be priced up or down?
Oh, well, silver will be, both gold and silver will be priced up. I mean, they've been suppressed for years, but silver has been suppressed, call it for 50 years, since the Hunt brothers. After that debacle, they figured out that they can price silver using futures options, OTC derivatives, and they've got it to the point where I think the ratio now is 87 to 1. It takes 87 ounces of silver to buy 1 ounce of gold, but it comes out of the ground at 10 to 1. So God's ratio is 10 to 1 and man's ratio is 87 to 1, and they've completely bastardized the pricing mechanism.
Isn't it funny how it always kind of floats right around just above mining cost? Isn't it funny how that does that?
Right. Yeah, because they've got to keep these companies in business in order to create supply. But the supply over the last 4 or 5 years has not met the demand, and the demand is starting to explode just because of all these Green New Deals. I mean, solar panels alone are going to eat up very close to 50% of every silver ounce that's produced.
Wow.
In a year. I mean, you're looking at 400 million ounces of demand for solar panels, and I think global production is what, 850, 900 million ounces.
We haven't had you're one of the first to say that this is going to turn into Mad Max. This is going to be, highway robbery, and this is going to free. We haven't had that yet, although we're getting, the shooting the medical executive in the back, and then people putting up wanted posters, and all this cruelty, which I'm totally against. You don't get to judge people. I don't care how bad they are. That's not your purview. But how close are we to Mad Max? I mean, what would you tell people to do? What would you be telling people to do? And how close are we to Mad Max? And what would you tell people to do? There you go.
Well, the first thing to do is not to be in a highly populated area. You want to be out, out from metropolitan areas. You want to be rural. You want to know your neighbors. And again, Greg, my thesis all along has been based on it would be a credit/currency crisis. The two go hand in hand because all currencies on the planet are debt-based. And I mean, the thesis, which now is right in your face, where the U.S. Treasury's got to spend over $1 trillion a year in interest. It's going to be $1.5 trillion this year, and likely 1.8, maybe 2 trillion the following year. That's the math right there. It says the U.S. can't continue because the U.S. not only can we not pay the debt back, but we're going to have a problem paying the debt service. And markets don't wait until the check doesn't arrive. Markets will look at what the tax receipts are versus the outright amount of debt service and the trend of the debt service. And that's the math that says the U.S. is going to have a massive credit crisis, and when credit stops flowing, that's when you'll see Mad Max. Because everything in the real economy, and I've talked about this 100 plus times, everything in the real economy functions because of the use of credit. Everything you touch, everything you see, everything you eat, you drink, you drive, whatever, you flip a light switch on, everything you do on a daily basis is made possible or made available by the use of credit.
What would you be telling people to do right now? I mean, Martin Armstrong, before I say that, Martin Armstrong, he's in demand all over the world. He has a live stream. He has 100,000 live streams. The cheapest one, if you look on his website. And I'm not backbiting him. I love him, and I think he's great. He's smart, and people love him. I mean, I'm just telling you who he is. He made $150 million. $1,500 a pop for the cheapest live stream. He had more than 100,000 live streams. And I asked him, what would you do? And he said, I have 2 years of food. This is, what? This is Martin Armstrong. This is not some, tinfoil hat clown. This is a real guy in demand all over the world. So what do you say about what people need to do?
Well, I would first say there's a lot more to it than saying I have 2 years of food, because you could live in Manhattan and have two years of food and not make it out of the first week because you live in a condo complex, and you'll have gangs going door to door, busting doors down. So
you mean like the gangs that came up here from Venezuela? Yeah, that's really happening. Oh, okay. Go ahead.
Well, my point being is you need to make a plan, and probably the biggest variable is where you live, whether you live rural or whether you live urban. If you live urban, you could have all kinds of guns, all kinds of food, but you're still not going to make it because you have all kinds of population around you. You don't know where the threats are going to come from. You don't know when they're going to come. You don't know who friend or foe is. But living out in the country, if your closest neighbor is a half a mile or a mile away, you know who these people are. And if you got somebody on your property that you don't recognize, well, in times like that, you're going to have to use lead at that point. All I will say is you need to have a good location, and you need to prepare to go it alone for 2 weeks, 2 months, and I've said many times, God forbid, 2 years. You need to be as self-sufficient as you possibly can, and you can't do it by yourself. You're going to need to have a group, because obviously you've got to sleep at night, and you've got to have different talents. You may have one guy who knows how to fix a water pump, and another guy who knows how to care for cattle, chickens, whatever. You need a group. You need to be out and rural, and you need to be able to be self-sufficient, and that includes the grid going down. That includes a water supply that doesn't get cleaned. If you live out in the country, you're going to use your own water well, so that's not really a concern unless you get some type of a chemical dump near your supply. But you just want to be self-sufficient. That's a number one.
And you think 2025 with this Bank of England, nobody's reporting this. I'm stunned that you're like, this is a big deal. Yes, the Russians stealing their money, that's a big deal. Yeah, we're almost at war, that's a big deal. But this is the financial big deal that all of a sudden in 2025 the Bank of England says, well, we're going to bail people out, but you don't get to know who it is. And you saying that's the ding, 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 ring the bell, well, we're at the top.
Yeah, that's ringing a bell. And think about the sentiment out there. The sentiment is, oh, thank God Trump won, he's going to save us. And I think very early in the administration, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, people are going to start to figure out, hey, wait a minute. Yeah, they're doing the right things, but it looks like things are going bad. In the economy, in markets. Trump is not the savior. He may or may not, have good intentions, but he can't overturn math. The only thing that he can do, and I've said this all along, is that when things go bad, we must follow the Constitution. And one of those things following the Constitution, and this would be a super bright spot, but I don't hold out much hope until the first reset fails, is that if we followed the Constitution, money would be backed 100% by gold and silver. That's in the Constitution. So if the system goes down and they're trying to reboot it. My hope, but again, I highly doubt it, is that Trump would say, hey, wait a minute, we got to go back to the Constitution, and only gold and silver can either be or back money.
And this is where you get the people, oh, there's not enough gold to do that. You know, yeah, there is. There's just not enough price to do it. It's the price. And you were talking about, you know, anywhere upward, even Jim Rickards, and I just want to kind of add that you're not just a lone voice. He says, depends on how much you want to back it by. Rickards, who's a I don't know, 8-time best-selling author, and he says, you know, he brought up 80,000, 40,000, depending on how much you want to back it by. 100,000. You brought up 100,000. You brought up 125,000 most recently, right? If you look at all the debt and how much gold supposedly we have, 8 point. You know.
I believe the last one who did that calculation was pretty close to COVID. So we've added so much more debt. I've not done the calculation, but I imagine it's got to be 175, 200,000 per ounce. And I will mention.
And the reason why you say 100, hold on. The reason why you say that is because here's how much gold we have, 8,000 plus tons, and here's how much debt we have. You divide the gold into the debt, and you get 175,000 per ounce.
Right, you get a number, but the problem with that number is we don't know if that gold exists. I highly doubt it, and we have no idea how much future debt is going to be piled on. So you don't really have a true numerator or denominator.
Now, you'd be a buyer of gold, I take it.
Well, gold is real money. And, I mean, gold is money. Everything else is credit. And credit in a defaulting world, I mean, all credit is going to default. And what will happen is, as credit defaults, capital is going to flee to cash. And at that point in time, the only cash will be gold and silver.
Boy, your website, which has really grown by leaps and bounds, this is why, because of the stuff you're talking about. All these things that you talked about today are on your website if you just scroll down. I mean, it's just really, this is the kind of analyst you're not going to see on CNBC or Fox Business or Neil Cavuto or any. You're not going to see any of this stuff. It's, oh, Bitcoin's 101,000. It's going to go to 250,000. I'm thinking to myself, I heard somebody say this, that it was going to go to 250,000. I'm thinking, what is going on with the U.S. dollar if Bitcoin hits 250,000? What's going on with that?
Well, already what's going on with the U.S. dollar this century. Go back to January 1st, 2000, and gold was $270 an ounce. Now it's $2,700. What is that? That's a 90% drop in the value of the dollar right there.
Wow. Your website, BillHolter.com. It's a free website and a lot of great analysis on it. I appreciate you coming on. I got you on before the last, before the end of the year for 2024. I hope to have you on in 2025. Of course, you're one of my regular guys. Bill Holter, thanks for joining us today on USAWatchdog.com. I really appreciate you.
Thank you, Greg.
Don't forget to hit that like button. It really helps out the channel. And if you want to stay updated with more content like this, be sure to subscribe and click the bell icon so you never miss a video.